PPC is pretty critical to any brand's plan, any seller's plan for selling on Amazon. And Amazon themselves, they're investing more and more in the advertising portions of Seller Central and AMS. And I think having a clear strategic approach to your advertising on Amazon is just critical to success.
This is the E-commerce Brain Trust, a podcast about building momentum online for established consumer brands. Join our hosts and their expert guests for high-level conversations about e-commerce strategies, trends, and innovations. Access our Brain Trust and boost your brand's e-commerce potential.
Hello and welcome to the E-commerce Brain Trust podcast. I'm your host, Kiri Masters, founder of Bobsled Marketing, and I'm joined by your co-host, Julie Spear, also from Bobsled Marketing.
Hi, everyone.
So in episode 1, we talked about promotions on Amazon and how promotional programs like buy one, get one free and coupons can be used to help drive sales on Amazon. But there's another way that can be used to drive traction on Amazon for brands and products, which is very tangible and measurable, and that is pay-per-click advertising. So today we're joined by a PPC specialist at Bobsled Marketing, Stefan Jordev. So Stefan, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came into the world of Amazon?
Hi, Kiri and Julie. Thank you for having me on this podcast. It's such a pleasure to be talking with you today. As for my background, I am a PPC specialist at Bobsled Marketing, working on Seller Central sponsored product ads and AMS campaigns. About how I found myself working with Amazon, I think my story may be similar to many Amazon PPC specialists. I started working out with Google AdWords, promoting several software solutions. And as I saw the budget for advertising going higher, so did my interest in PPC. I joined Bobsled about a year ago, and I started working with Amazon PPC exclusively. This is when I realized it plays a crucial part in the brand's overall strategy. And having the option to see the conversion and sales from PPC was what convinced me of its measurability and improved to be quite the advantage over other platforms.
That's interesting. So you come from a paid search background, but promoting software instead of physical products. So what is, just curious to hear how it's different in the world of physical consumer products versus software.
Well, I think I might have to go back to my previous point. And when working with software and Google AdWords in general, we're creating campaigns that lead to a landing page on our own website. So measuring that impact on advertising towards sales can be quite more difficult using Google AdWords than Amazon. I mean, you have to have people come into the website, download a free trial from it, work with our sales team before they close a sale. So attributing sales to PPC was a lot trickier with Google AdWords and with software solutions in general than what we do here at Bobsled, promoting physical products on Amazon.
And on the flip side, something I've heard just anecdotally is that Amazon's paid search platform, sponsored products and other ad types that we have available is like Google AdWords circa 2004 or something like that. It's a very immature platform. We're seeing lots of changes recently.
I would put it this way. We can definitely be looking at Google AdWords and Facebook's advertising platform to see where Amazon's platform may be going. It's definitely a little more basic than those, but I think it's connected to Amazon having additional streams of revenue other than just advertising. I do see it improving and going into that direction, however.
Yeah, even in the past year, we've seen some significant changes in PPC in the Amazon world.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, negative keywords, bid plus, headline search ads in Seller Central.
Yep, the storefronts coming in from initially for AMS vendors only, and then being transferred to Seller Central as well. I think Amazon has really started investing in their advertising platforms.
Yeah, and it's a good cue for anyone selling on Amazon. When you see them investing in one of their programs, good idea for you to invest as well.
Oh, yeah.
Julie, we're 4 episodes into our podcast. Why do we want to talk about PPC now, and maybe some of the questions that our clients have about PPC spend in general?
Yeah, I think PPC is pretty critical to any brand's plan, any seller's plan for selling on Amazon. And Amazon themselves, they're investing more and more in the advertising portions of Seller Central and AMS. And I think having a clear strategic approach to your advertising on Amazon is just critical to success. And so it's definitely a part of every client account that we manage. A PPC strategy is integral to it. And one of the main questions that we find clients asking is, how much should I spend? How long until I start seeing results? But the first question is really, how much should I spend? What's a good starting point for fresh campaigns?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely a question I've heard. Determining PPC spend can be a vital component to the overall success of the account. As you said, PPC plays a huge role here, so having the right budget dedicated to PPC can really be beneficial for your account. At Bobsled, pay-per-click advertising is the cornerstone component of our Amazon optimization service. And this is because PPC provides a very measurable form of acquiring sales on Amazon. We have several strategies we've worked with about determining PPC spend, whether it's a new client coming in or already established seller. And I just want to cover several of them, and then probably our listeners can choose the best one that works within their budget and their overall strategy. I just want to point out before we dive into the strategies, this is kind of like a precondition, but it's very important for clients to be 100% aware of all costs associated with the Amazon presence, the costs associated with their products, and the Amazon fees they're paying. You have to be absolutely aware how much your product costs in order to determine the profitability margin, which we'll see later is very closely related to the ACoS and basically knowing if you're profitable from advertising or not.
That's such a great point, Stefan. Like, just before anything else, it is kind of surprising once brands get into the Amazon environment and that they may be used to operating under a different model, like a wholesale model, selling to retail stores, and they're expecting to get a little bit more lift from their retail partners in terms of promoting their products. But once you get onto Amazon, it's a different, depending on what type of platform you're selling on, it can be a different cost basis that you're working from. And so that's a great sort of foundation to jump onto before anything else, is to understand exactly what your margins are to the dollar and cent across your assortment.
Yeah, thanks, Kiri. It may seem like stating the obvious, but sometimes it really isn't. There are a lot of hidden fees that you have to be aware of.
Yeah.
So moving on, we'll just assume everybody knows the exact price of their product being present on Amazon. If I'm to start with the most interesting way of determining PPC budget, it would probably be the 25-25 rule. It's a term we have invented here at Bobsled. And we found it to be true for many clients. The rule itself suggests that 25% of your overall sales should come through PPC, while your campaigns operate at about 25% ACoS. So if we are to use an example to illustrate this, if you target a monthly revenue from Amazon of about $20,000, the advertising spend under the 25-25 rule would be around $1,200. So let's break that down a little bit. If the overall sales are $20,000, the sales to be sourced through PPC would be 25% of that, or $5,000. And if we're working with ACOS around 25%, 25% from $5,000 would be $1,250. And that's going to be your advertising budget. Yeah, and of course, it's not an exact science. Not always will these numbers be matching, but I think as a general framework, it really works for you to at least identify some boundaries about your advertising spend, either daily or weekly or monthly.
Stefan, what's your thoughts on the 25-25 rule for new product launches versus optimizing existing campaigns for?
Actually, Julie, when we're working with established sellers, I'm sure anyone would agree estimating the spend would be a little bit easier than when working with somebody who is new to Amazon. Maybe if somebody is to join Amazon and has not had any advertising efforts before, I would probably recommend a different type of strategy for estimating spend, which would be the ACOS-based one. And that's basically defining the acceptable ACOS for you when you're profitable, and then spending as much of a budget as you can dedicate to it while working under that ACOS. Because it would be a lot more difficult estimating the overall number of sales for a new client, for a newly joined Amazon seller, and then dedicating the percentage of sales which would come through advertising and then the ACOS itself. And even if we're able to do it, sometimes when the seller is new to Amazon, the sales that come through advertising may actually be quite larger than 25%. We've seen this go up to 60, 70, 80% for clients who just came to Amazon. We have to keep in mind these people have no reviews, they have no SEO optimization done prior to joining to Amazon. So PPC is pretty much the only driver of traffic for those first few months.
Got it. So 25-25 is much more for an established brand where you're looking to refine and optimize your advertising efforts.
Yes, I would definitely recommend it to an established seller more than a new one.
Where do we have exceptions to this rule? Are there certain product categories which have significantly higher or lower expected ACOS than that 25% rule?
Basically, I've seen this rule being true for many categories we've worked with. I think the beauty category may be an exception. It may be just because of the number of clients that we've been working with. But I've seen the number of percentages from PPC being higher for the beauty category. And I think everything else might actually fall within the rule rather than being the exception.
So in the beauty category, we see ACOS higher than 25% generally?
Actually, I was thinking about sales from PPC being a higher percentage of the overall sales than 25%. For the beauty category, I've seen them going quite higher than that.
What about apparel? Can that be a little bit more expensive of a category to advertise in, where ACOS might spike up a little bit higher?
Yeah. I mean, of course, it's going to be dependent on a larger number of factors than just the category. So the question here would be, are we working with an established brand? Are we working with somebody who just came to Amazon, the price, the reviews they have? But I believe that working with a brand that has figured out ways to target customers at keywords which convert better, 25% ACOS is really acceptable for it. So,
okay.
Great. So what about the other sort of options that we have in terms of figuring out what an acceptable PPC spend is?
Yeah, I think we touched on this a little bit when we were discussing about the categories, but another approach you may follow would be the spend as a percentage of total sales. And this approach assumes there is an ideal ratio of advertising spend to the total sales. And for most accounts, we found this optimal ratio to be between 8 and 12%. As I mentioned previously, if you are familiar with your profit margin at the SKU level, calculations will seem a lot easier. But if I'm to use the same example we used before about targeting $20,000 as overall sales, the advertising spend following this approach would be between $1,600 and $2,400, depending on how aggressive you want to be. So, of course, again, this is not a rule. It can go a little bit lower than 8%, especially if you're just starting and you're not seeing enough clicks from the campaigns. It can go a little bit higher than 12%, but we've seen this as a general rule for many clients, covering a variety of categories. And as long as you're profitable spending between those ranges, I think you're doing a good job on your advertising efforts. And then moving on to my favorite one, which I covered when I was talking to Julie, would be the ACOS-based estimation. This is because you're pretty much free to spend as much of a budget as you can dedicate to it if you're working under an acceptable ACOS. It can take a few days, maybe weeks, to figure out what your overall ACOS is, just because of the sales lag that can go up to 72 days. But once you find that acceptable ACOS and you've optimized your campaigns to work either on that level or beyond it, which means you're actually making money, dedicating as much of advertising budget as possible is a great way to optimize the spend and the sales that would be coming in through those campaigns. The only issue here would be if you're limited with advertising funds. By the time you get the payment from Amazon, you might be limited to invest higher amounts of dollars to it. But if you see that ACOS working for you, I would definitely suggest you utilize on that and try to spend as much as possible.
So,
yeah.
What would
if you're spending $1 and getting $10 out, you want to, unless you have the cash flow constraints, like you mentioned, you want to be putting as many dollars into that slot machine as you can.
Exactly. Strike the iron while it's hot, I guess.
Yeah.
And what would you say would be a good frequency for measuring the ACOS when determining changes to make around spend and bid? So look, you mentioned it can take up to 72 hours for sales to reconcile and all of that. Should sellers be looking at their ACOS at a weekly basis before determining where to make changes, or biweekly, monthly? What would you say would be a good frequency?
Yeah, I believe that when people start running their own advertising campaigns, I think the mistake to be done here would be logging in every few hours and checking out how they do. This way you'll only see the spend, and it may lead to a disappointment. I think it is Amazon who suggests that we should leave the campaigns running for about a week before making any changes to it. So once you launch the campaigns, I would not recommend going into the account for a few days at least, just to see. You can definitely log in and see how that spend is going, but don't expect to see any sales after at least a week has passed. What we try to do is try to record the weekly spend versus sales ratio, but we do leave some days, like at least 72 hours. So if we're looking at Sunday through Saturday as a week, I would be looking at the real ACOS on a Wednesday or a Thursday. So the important thing to note here is it will take a few days up to a week before you even have a general idea of how your ACOS might be looking.
So kind of the message here is to give it time and then look at it before you're making any changes.
Exactly. Just keep in mind that when you're looking in your campaigns, the sales are not recorded yet, and don't feel discouraged about it.
And you said that Amazon says it takes up to 72 days for a sale to be attributed to a PPC campaign?
Yeah, and
72 hours.
I'm sorry. Did I say? Yeah, it's 72 hours. But then the idea behind it is it can be a few days for the person who clicked on your advertisement to go back to it and convert. And I've seen this being calculated as 7 days after the click in Seller Central, and even up to 14 days in AMS. So by the time it takes for the person to actually convert and the sales to be recorded as a sale which came from PPC, some days will definitely pass. And the longer you wait until measuring the impact from your previous week's advertising efforts, the more accurate numbers you'll get.
Right. Well, we're recording this episode in September, and we're coming up to the fourth quarter. So I wanted to ask you, we've kind of come off the back of Prime Day as well a couple of months ago. So what can people expect in terms of PPC spend and effects of seasonality with their campaigns?
Well, I guess it would be dependent on the product, but if you have a seasonable product, if you're selling Christmas lights, you're definitely going to be dependent on the seasonality of the product. If you're selling products which are a little bit more resistant to seasonality, I think you're going to be doing well throughout the whole year. But like you said, we're expecting Q4, and seasonality aside, if we're looking at PPC spend and sales from PPC and even overall sales, I think we're about to see an increase in all of those parameters. We're going to have to spend more, we're going to have to bid more, and ultimately I think we'll sell more.
Definitely. It's an exciting time of the year.
Definitely.
This is where the magic happens. All right. So any last parting shots, Stefan? Final tips?
Probably as a general conclusion, I would say there are a lot of factors which impact the advertising budgets. It's your profit margin, how aggressive you want to be tackling the category you're in, your overall Amazon sales level. However, having the calculations in place and the plans before you dive into advertising can be really important and probably crucial to your success in the future.
Yeah, for sure. I see the PPC, unlike other efforts that brands should still employ to build traffic and help conversions on their product detail pages, like optimizing the copy and the product descriptions, the keywords, the product images, promotions, things like that. There's less of a measurable effect than we can get from PPC. So there is a lot more data behind it. We're able to be a little bit more prescriptive and analytical about how much we spend and what the ROI is. And it's really the ROI that should dictate the spend. But to your point, Stefan, there is a minimum amount of time that we need to wait to be able to see if a campaign is successful before cutting it short or changing the strategy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've kind of heard a rule of thumb of letting campaigns you're always maintaining them, but letting campaigns run for about 6 weeks to see the real efforts take hold. Does that align with your perspective, Stefan?
Yeah, I mean, within the 6 weeks, they will definitely need to be optimized, but I think the rule of thumb applies to seeing the positive impact of working on your campaigns. It can definitely be up to 6 weeks, a month and a half. Yep.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us on the show, Stefan. And we're going to have show notes which link back up to some articles that you've written yourself in the past about this PPC spend question and some of the questions that we get from clients and some of the strategies that you've mentioned. So the show notes for this episode are available at bobsledmarketing.com/podcast. And thank you, Julie and Stefan, for joining me today.
Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, Stefan.
Thank you.